Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bob Chat for our second half of this special with Peter. Peter's back to talk a little bit more about his job. So,
yeah, I've had my glass of water. I'm good.
Having a quick drink. Fantastic. Your role as a funeral director is to help people in these difficult times. Lots of people have times when they're sad because they've lost a loved one has died. So could you explain what your role as a funeral director is in all this kind of times when people lose a loved one? What do you try to do?
Well, we try to support people in their recovery, in their grieving. I think traditionally the funeral profession possibly has been seen and possibly seen itself of dealing with the body of the person who has died, or saying, well, we're going to carry out a burial or kind of cremation, those being the options that there are. Our goal is to support people in the life that lies ahead, to say, yes, we will carry out a funeral service, we will arrange for you to carry out the burial or cremation of the body of the person who has died. And that is part of what we do, because it is an important step in the recovery. A life ends, but the story goes on. I quite like the idea of a funeral as storytelling, and the fact that the life has ended doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. We can carry on telling that story. There are many things that we can do, and that's what we're about, to say that there is a role, there is a life ahead. You are going to carry on living that life. Our role is to make arrangements which support you to do that, to recontextualize the person who has died into the past. They are no longer physically with us, but they remain part of our story, and we are going into the future. And our role as funeral directors is to support that transition, to say we need to find a way of living without this person, to change the life that we live from one that had this person in it to one that does not, and that can still be wonderful, that can still be joyful, that can still be brilliant. We can celebrate the person, and we can live our lives now as well, now that they're no longer there. We reposition them in that. That is what our role as funeral directors is. So we find out about the person who's died, we find out what their story is, we find out how we can tell it, we find out what the person who is arranging with us is about, and how we can support them in that work, in the work of recovery, in the work of developing the new life. That's our role.
Fantastic. So it's kind of celebrating that person, holding on to the memories you have of that person. And I guess it's kind of what you were saying earlier. You said in our first chat that you appreciate people who love and support, and I guess that's what you're doing for people who are in a difficult time, who have lots to do and need someone who knows what they're doing, who, like you, has the experience and the answers and all that kind of thing as well, to help people who are feeling really sad and maybe just need someone to help them, listen to them, take on board. Am I getting this right? Is it the kind
I think so. And there's a lot of pastoral work in what we do, and that goes hand in hand with the wonderful pastoral work that others do in this context as well. There are bereavement counsellors. So some people may need absolutely specialist support, and there are grief counsellors who do that, and they do it brilliantly. Equally, there are people who lead funeral ceremonies. There are some people of faith who lead religious funeral ceremonies, and there are other people, humanists and civil celibates and independent celibates, who lead funeral ceremonies that are not faith-based, and they do that work as well. So that there is a lot of pastoral work in what we do. Our role is much more than simply a functional one. And that's the view that we take. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, love is an interesting word in this context. I think, do we provide love? That's an interesting question. I think there is love inherent in what we do. It's an interesting word to use. Yes.
You meet all kinds of people in your job as a funeral director. Does your faith, your belief in Christianity, help you in this role? Does it impact on your job in any way, or do you have to keep the two quite separate?
Yes, I believe it does. I do pray about what I do. But yes, there is a balancing act, and you have to be pretty careful. I don't bring my faith to the table when I work with clients to arrange funerals. That would be quite wrong. As a funeral director, I work with people of different faiths and people of no faith, and I hope that I do that well, and I hope that I do that without trying to impose any kind of my own views upon them. I hope I can bring expertise to the table, technical expertise and knowledge of faith. I'm fortunate, I think, in that at university I studied religion. And so I learned about different faiths at that time, and that knowledge I can bring to an extent to the work that I do. You know, when I was working in Aylesbury, I had the privilege of working with the Hindu community there to provide funeral services. And quite clearly, if I were to bring a Christian faith to that wouldn't be the right thing to do. But I would work with that family, use my knowledge of the Hindu faith, such as it is, to support families in that context. If I work with a family who are not people of faith, then I can work with humanist elements or civil elements to provide ceremonies that work for those families and support the position that they take and what they need. And within what I was saying before about assisting recovery and about the work for the future, providing ceremonies within that context, I hope is effective.
So you pray and you ask God to support you, but for your job, it has to be kept a little separate. That's great. Thank you. That's a great answer. My kind of last question really for this segment is, have you always wanted to be a funeral director? I mean, how did you get into this job?
I blame God, actually. I thought I had a vocation to the... No, I do, really. It's all God's fault. I thought I had a vocation to the priesthood. And I went through as Phil would have done, who invited me to do this, as he would have done, and as in someone else I saw on your recordings did as well. Went through the selection process.
That'll be Bishop John. Is that Bishop John?
It was Bishop John. Yes. Yeah. And I went through that process, but I wasn't selected. And of course, you know, that hurts. That's difficult. But at the end of it, so I thought, well, okay, God, if that wasn't what you were telling me, what were you telling me? And I was visiting my parents in Staffordshire one time, and I was sort of lying there in bed thinking about this, and I sort of ticked off mentally in my head all the things that I thought I was good at, which is probably not much, and all the things that I was interested in. And at the bottom, it said funeral director, and I thought, seriously? Really? So I did what you do. I was living in Lancaster at the time, and so I went to see local vicar who I knew, a local fixer who was good at making things happen, and I said to him, you know, I think I want to be a funeral director. And after he'd fallen off his chair, he picked himself up and he went, seriously? So he went to see a funeral director who was working in Lancaster and arranged for me to meet him, and I met him, and he was interested in me, and he took me on initially on a part-time basis, and then I moved to Aylesbury, and there was a vacancy there on a full-time basis, and it all fell into place incredibly neatly. And so, yes, I sort of think, okay, so it wasn't a vocation for priesthood, I sort of vocation to the funeral profession. And I believe it is a vocation. Some people believe that in a religious sense, some people don't. But I think certainly it is that there is a pastoral role here. There is possibly a ministry role. Again, whether you believe that that's in the religious ministry or in a pastoral sense, not religiously, I think that is an important part of what we do.
I think from hearing you talk, the way you...
So no, it wasn't what I intended to do, but I love the profession. It's a great profession. There are a lot of great people in this profession, and they do wonderful things. So that's how I became a funeral director. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story, because it sounds like it wasn't an easy journey because of the disappointment at the start, but it sounds like God had a plan, and here you are.
Yeah, I have no regrets. It's a wonderful profession to be in.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. And that's all we really have time for. So on
Okay.
behalf of Dive In, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us this week, for explaining some of what it is to be a funeral director. And
No,
say
thank you,
goodbye
Bob.
to everybody, Peter.
Goodbye. Goodbye.